Welcome to Your Empowered Birth. And this is for the second time or third time mom, the seasoned mom, who maybe you had a traumatic birth experience and you want differently this time. Or maybe you are a first time mom, but you've heard all of these horror stories. And maybe there's something that's going on in your pregnancy right now where you think that maybe natural birth is not going to go the way you want it. And you're kind of trying to prepare and you're thinking to yourself, well, what if I do have a C-section? What if I do have an induction? Am I going to be traumatized by that and not be able to move forward? Well, I'm here to tell you that you can have an empowered birth, whether you're a first time mom or a second time mom, whether you've had a traumatic birth or whether this is your first time and you've heard nothing but horror stories. When you get past your fear and you learn the tools of advocacy and you have that roadmap for planning your empowered birth, that is when you can move to your dreams and do impossible things. Like my best friend, Jenny, who had an empowered, true natural birth experience, a VBAC at that, a vaginal birth after cesarean, in the hospital, completely unassisted. And all the odds were stacked against her. She had a 15% chance of VBAC success. According to the VBAC calculator, she had chronic high blood pressure, gestational diabetes. She was 41 years old. She was the epitome of the high risk mom, and she did this. And I've had other clients who have had amazing empowered births using this method that I lay out inside my book, Your Empowered Birth. So it is available on Amazon if you want to support the empowered birth movement. And at the same time, I'm giving you access to this book by reading it to you through these videos. Why would I read to you my book when you could go and get it on Amazon? Well, the idea is simple. Have you ever gone to a library and you've picked up a book and you've read through it and you've been like, wow, this is amazing. I want to get a copy of my own, and you've gone and done that? Or have you recommended that to somebody else after reading it? Or have you heard an audiobook, or maybe somebody lent you something and you heard it, you wanted it, you said, I want more of it? That's why I have decided, because it is more important to me that you get that beautiful, true natural birth experience, or as close to it as you can possibly get. Having that empowered birth empowers you for life, and nobody can take your power away from you again. And the empowered birth method is transformative. It is revolutionary in how you come to your birth and how you come to your motherhood, how you transform all aspects of your life. And I would be incredibly selfish if I just kept it behind a paywall and said, you can only get this information if you read my book. No, I don't do that. I also have courses and programs available, and you can find out more about that by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com. I have free resources, I have mini guides, and you can always reach out to me, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, if you have any questions. I am here to support you because I am committed to you having that empowered birth. And if you are a seasoned mom and you have been screwed over time and time again, or maybe just once, and this is your second baby, and you're like, I don't want what happened to me the first time to happen to me again. I want to have another baby, and I'm terrified because of the trauma that I endured. Well, this is the chapter for you. Because after my traumatic birth with my son, I was like, you know what? I'm having my home birth, and I don't care what I have to do to get it. I will move heaven and earth to get my home birth. And I almost got tricked out of it. If you haven't read the rest of Your Empowered Birth, or you haven't seen the rest of those videos, if you're just coming in new to this, then I'm just going to remind you, there is a playlist available. It's on my website, on my channel. All you have to do is go and get that Your Empowered Birth book playlist, and you'll be able to get the entire story. Again, as I said, I'm committed to you having an empowered birth. And you can go and get my book off of Amazon. It's on Kindle, and you can get it for paperback if you want your own copy. But truly, the power of Your Empowered Birth is not just what's inside the book itself. It's getting the extras. So you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras, where you get a free birth plan mini course. You get ideas on how to plan your birth location. You get questions to ask before you hire your care provider. You get questions to ask before you hire your doula. And you also understand the overview of what true natural birth looks like. Because originally this book was a 90,000 word behemoth, and I had everything packed into it. But now it's streamlined. Now there's also journal prompts and questions that you want to ask. And as I said in the last video, when I talked about getting the birth you want the first time, go back and watch that if you're a second-time mom, because it will still help you see where you might have fallen short the last time and what you can do differently. Those questions will help you. They're also available at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. When you take action is when you suddenly start to transform your birth. So everybody who's worked with me, it's not just getting information. They're not like, oh, I got a whole bunch of information. And you can do that. You can absolutely watch every single one of these videos, follow my channel, like, share, subscribe to these videos, get all of my content. But if you don't take action, you're just going to stay stuck in the fear traps and the natural birth traps. And it's going to be harder for you to advocate for yourself in the medical system. You're going to crumble under the pressure. You're going to give up. You're going to give in. And you're never going to get that beautiful natural birth the way that you deserve to have it. You're never going to have that dream birth that you've been envisioning, that you've been secretly keeping. And it's like, I don't want to say it because other people are going to think I'm crazy for wanting this, or they're going to tell me to lower my expectations, leave my dignity at the door, tell me that what I want isn't possible. But if it's something that's in your heart, I'm telling you, it is possible. And by never going for that dream, it's just going to haunt you. It will haunt you every time you see a birth story. Every time your child has a birthday, it will haunt you. So with the empowered birth method, we aim for that true natural birth and for that dream birth. And then we only pull back as needed. And that's what the 5-pillar system does, is it creates that safety net. So without further ado, let's get into chapter 7, how to heal and get the birth you want the next time. So things didn't turn out the way you wanted. Maybe you gave in and got the epidural. Maybe you were induced. Maybe you even had a forceps delivery or a C-section. Or maybe you just weren't where you wanted to be. Maybe you had wanted a home birth, but circumstances or fear sent you to the hospital. Whatever it was that happened in your birth, you have regrets. You wish it could have turned out differently. You might have a lot of sadness, anger, even rage that this could have happened. My friend Jenny had been reeling after her cesarean and wanted to scream, "Fuck everyone who ever had a vaginal birth." My friend Wendy was angry and defeated because she had wanted a vaginal birth after cesarean, but at the last minute, her doctor had made it sound like a repeat cesarean was necessary. My friend Christine was convinced she couldn't go through with another pregnancy again. I was livid that my son had come out at nearly 8 pounds, perfectly healthy, and that all those growth scans saying he was too small to birth at home had been a lie. When I started teaching the Empowered Birth workshops in the spring of 2021, my clients, Lisa and Rebecca, were furious that they had been lied to and tricked into believing their bodies were broken and defective. Many mothers have had their birth plans squashed by dismissive care providers and a medical system built around efficiency and reduction of liability. If this has happened to you, I want you to know that you are not alone. In fact, your story has now been considered normal. I know what you're going to say. How can this be normal? It doesn't feel normal to me. And you're right. It's not normal. At least it shouldn't be. It is an unfortunate lesson that you have learned the hard way, and you have every right to be angry about it. In fact, I encourage that anger. Go be angry. Scream, cry, or write a letter that you never intend to send. Get it out and accept that these are feelings that deserve to be expressed. You do not have to just be thankful for a healthy baby. You don't even have to be thankful that it wasn't worse. If you or your baby didn't come out of birth with severe complications and severe trauma, that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to grieve your birth experience you didn't get. And if something tragic did happen, it wasn't your fault. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but oftentimes it was something else that led up to it happening. There's a name for it when the medical system caused the problem: iatrogenic. But the problem is that often they save you from the very complication they caused and then call themselves the heroes. This isn't out of malice. Often they just don't see what they're doing. They were taught to manage birth and do things and then fix the problems when that rare complication that they didn't tell you could happen arises. Hensi Goer talks about this in The Thinking Woman's Guide to a Better Birth, when she explains how a lot of the complications that doctors are aware of happening aren't properly discussed, because as long as the doctor is confident they can fix it, usually with drugs or surgery, then it's not that big of a concern. So, they might not have told you everything that could have happened to you during your induction. Or they might not have warned you that the back pain you're still experiencing months after your birth was actually caused by the epidural they talked you into having, insisting there were no risks. Regardless, you have that feeling that one of the things that they did to you during your birth led to the trauma and pain you're experiencing now. You might have even done some research since that day and know exactly what it was that derailed your birth, and you feel cheated. They lied to you. How could they just lie to your face, tell you there were no risks, and all that time they knew what happened? They didn't even warn you. If only you had known. You never would have agreed if you had known this could happen. The question now is, what do you do now? You're not done having babies. You want more, but you don't want the same thing that happened last time to happen again. So, how do you get past this? First, you need to heal. Step 1, reframe your birth story. Here's the reality. What they did can't be undone, but that doesn't mean that you can't have better this time. That's what this section is about: healing and moving forward after a traumatic birth. I've served hundreds of mothers who have been traumatized and shown them parts of the map to a better birth that they hadn't been able to see the first time. The 5 pillars of empowered birth have helped them question what they were told about what happened to them, so they could see that their bodies were not broken. Many of these mothers have gone on to have home births, VBACs, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, and avoid another painful induction. Some of my favorite stories are those of moms who have had a vaginal birth after multiple cesareans, VBAC after multiple cesarean, or VBAMC, or even breech vaginal births at home. These are the kind of births where it's nearly impossible to find support, and few care providers will attend them. And yet, against the odds, these moms have done it anyway. So what set them apart from others who just resigned themselves to repeat cesareans and gave up their power, thinking that's just the way birth is? They believed they could have better, and then they went after it. This sounds like a simple thing to do, but the fact is that a lot more goes into it. Deciding that you will never again give up your power is easy, but taking the action and acting in spite of fear is what's harder. The 5 pillars will help you with that too. It's the secret to getting everything you want, and the steps that were outlined in the previous chapter will help you reclaim your power. I have to level with you though. It's not going to be as easy to get past your fear now that you've already seen firsthand what can happen. Those images and feelings stick with you. Those doubts are going to come up. You're going to be asking yourself, what if I'm really broken? And you're going to have moments where something happens that leads to you fearing that you're going to wind up right where you were last time. If you had a cesarean, you're going to wonder whether you are even capable of birthing naturally. If you were induced, you will wonder if you'll go overdue again. If you feel you didn't fight hard enough, you might worry you'll crumble under pressure again. I get it. I had fears too, though mine were around being told that I was no longer allowed to birth at home and pushing for 3 hours again. Here's the secret to getting past those fears. Pretend that the hospital doesn't exist. What I do when I first sit down with my clients is ask them what they would do if they suddenly found themselves too far away from a hospital. I ask them what they might do if they went into labor on the highway. What if the baby came too fast and they birthed in the back of a taxi? What if they were at home? What if the roads were snowed in and they couldn't leave their house? What if they just suddenly went into labor in their bathroom and it was so fast that they couldn't even call 911? In all these scenarios, one of two things would happen. Either they would fail to progress and help would arrive because emergency responders don't wait around, or the baby would come and they'd do it themselves. This is what I want you to consider. Birth is a physiological process, like sneezing and going to the bathroom. You take for granted that your body can do these things, right? Well, when a baby is ready to come, that baby doesn't wait. Your body is designed to expel that baby, and it doesn't care that you're not in the hospital. Now, I know you don't want to birth in the back of a taxi or in an abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere. I'm not telling you to do that, obviously. But the important thing to recognize is that if that scenario did happen, you could do it. This is true whether you had a cesarean, were induced, or had a forceps delivery. It's true even if your doctor insists that your small pelvis was to blame for your difficult labor. It's true even if you failed to progress and they gave you Pitocin. The reality is that the story you were told about why your birth plan failed is not the full truth. If it was, then there wouldn't be stories of unplanned vaginal breech births or home births after cesarean, or births where the mom was unprepared but somehow managed to have an unassisted birth. In the cases where these births were a surprise, the mothers are regarded as heroes and warriors. They are called brave. But if you plan to birth without intervention, especially if you had a previously difficult birth, then people will tell you that you're being reckless. They'll question your sanity. They'll vilify you and tell you that you're putting your experience above your baby. They're wrong to do that. And often what's really going on is that they're operating from their own flawed stories. I almost died might have felt true, but would that same situation have happened if you had been with a different care provider in a different birth location with the knowledge you are acquiring right now? I didn't go into labor on my own might also have a different meaning once you discover that you are a 42-week mama and that your doctor didn't even give you enough time to go into labor, but instead stressed you out and pushed an induction. My pelvis was too small might just be proven false once you examine the circumstances of how you had been birthing and who was attending you. Leg position matters as much as being off your back, and often doctors can rush the pushing stage because they are operating on the assumption that birthing must be efficient and complete in a certain time limit rather than just take as long as it takes. Now, it might be possible that you run into the same issues, and that's a big if. More likely, what you will find is that your body works always did work, and you were just another unfortunate victim of the same maternity care system that operates like a McDonald's drive-thru. Before you start examining those old stories, though, you need to understand something else. If you are still stuck in trauma, you can't look at things objectively. In fact, trying to go back and retrace the steps of your previous birth can be incredibly triggering. For this reason, I encourage you to go beyond the scope of this book and look into trauma therapy. I promise you won't need too many sessions, but it's incredibly important for your healing. The kind I find most helpful is called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It helps you take certain images and memories of events during your birth and file them away so that they no longer haunt you, kind of like defragmenting your computer hard drive. Once you have done this, your next step is to get your birth records. You can ask for the hospital or your care provider to send them to you. If you're already pregnant, then you can also bypass the receptionist and the red tape by asking your current care provider for a copy of all your records. They already had them faxed over or sent electronically, so there's no reason they can't give them to you. You can't fully process your story until you have the full picture. Having your records will give you that picture, and it will also help you see where your previous care team might have lied to you. It happens more than you would think. This is why I suggest therapy first, because in reading your records, you will likely find things that upset you. If that happens, then having the tools to calm and regulate your nervous system will help you get past that feeling faster and continue gathering all the details. Please also note that I have written a report, How to Heal After Birth Trauma, and included it for you with this book. To get access, make sure you grab your bonuses at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. Journal exercise 2.1. When you have a clearer picture of the story of your last birth, you'll be ready to go through the exercises in the previous chapter. If you need a refresher, you can also download the complete list of questions for your journal exercises at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. In addition to those questions, you will also be asking the following. Number 1, what fears or beliefs did you have in your first pregnancy that might have led to you making the choices that you did? Number 2, what information did you have about birth and pregnancy that might have led to you not having all the details or knowing all your options? Number 3, what was your environment like for learning, support, and what conditions were present in your birth location that led to you feeling unsafe and unsupported to ask for what you really wanted or that did not support your birth process? Number 4, who did you hire in your last birth? What were some of the signs you ignored and now you recognize were red flags that led you to giving up your power? And number 5, what kind of support did you have last time? What had you needed to hear to make a different choice than you did? Once you can recognize what thoughts you had the first time and what actions you took, you'll be able to take full responsibility from this point forward. You are in control now. You are no longer going to blindly trust other people to lead you where you want to go. Instead, you are going to remain aware of what mistakes you made and the feelings that led to you choosing what you did, so that when those same feelings come up again, you'll be able to recognize what's happening and take a different path. The next part of this chapter will help you with that. Step 2, educate yourself for your do-over birth. Okay, so you already know what you don't want to happen. But if you keep focusing only on avoiding the past, it has a way of creeping up on you. This is what led to me almost giving up on my home birth for the second time. It's also what leads to a lot of moms thinking they can't fight for what they really want. Fear is a sneaky thing, and it pops up when you are at your most vulnerable. For this reason, when I've worked with my clients, I've made it perfectly clear that as we create the birth plan, we are also not going to get attached to how it has to happen. In fact, the more backup plans they create, the better. You already know that certain interventions or conditions in your pregnancy and birth are not going to work for you. Perhaps you were talked into a hospital birth and hated it. Maybe you had a bad experience with the epidural. Or maybe you had an induction and would like to avoid that at all costs. If you had a previous cesarean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're in for an even bigger fight. VBAC is a touchy subject, and a lot of medical professionals would prefer to control every aspect of your birth just to avoid a less than 1% chance of a catastrophe happening. I'm talking about uterine rupture. I can't possibly get into all the details here, but if you have had a previous cesarean and would like a vaginal birth, then two excellent resources are the International Cesarean Awareness Network, ICAN, and VBAC Facts. There are also additional resources at the back of this book. One thing you absolutely need to know about VBAC is that it's not a procedure. VBAC is the default outcome when you don't schedule a surgery or consent to a repeat cesarean. Sadly, a lot of people seem to have forgotten that labor will start on its own if you're given enough time, and even if your uterus is scarred, it doesn't mean you can't have a physiological birth without intervention. I have served women who have had multiple cesareans and helped them go on to have vaginal births. In fact, one of my first inspirations was my friend Wendy. Wendy had 3 previous cesareans. She was an older mother and deemed too fat by many of the doctors she consulted about having her 4th baby naturally. They all told her that it was too dangerous, citing a risk of uterine rupture as the main concern. She was told the percentage that the risk increased and the fact that she was 3 times more likely to have complications, but what her doctor hadn't counted on was Wendy actually knowing the numbers. This is what I encourage you to do. Know your numbers and start educating yourself on the risks before you talk to a medical professional. This is especially important if you are planning a vaginal birth after multiple cesareans, because the medical system will do anything they can to talk you out of it. You also need to be aware of all your rights. You might have made some choices or agreed to certain exams because you didn't know you could decline them. You might have been told that it was policy, and as a first-time mom, you didn't know that you could question it. It's not your fault, and now you know better, so you won't fall for those lines again. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for saying no. If they do, then they aren't the right people to support you. Finally, you need to start researching your options. There might have been things you overlooked before that you can explore for this pregnancy. Don't rule out home birth just because you think it's not allowed. Don't assume that because you had 1 or more cesareans that you are doomed to have another cesarean. Remember, you get to decide, not them. Unfortunately, knowing your rights and your true risk levels for interventions isn't enough, but it's still a start in the right direction. The more you discover about how birth works and why it didn't work last time, the more you'll be able to plan differently this time around. You'll also be more informed of the risks, and that will allow you to have a clearer picture of what your backup plans might look like. Journal exercise 2.2. Make sure that as you follow the questions for getting the right education, that you also include these as well. And as a reminder, the questions for the right education can be found either in the previous chapter for first-time moms, or you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and get the whole list. Number 1, is there anything in your birth records that you don't quite understand and need clarification on? Number 2, is there anything that could come up in your pregnancy based on what you know of your history that you need to know more about? Number 3, has anyone else had the kind of birth you want to have after having a similar experience to what happened in your previous births? Number 4, what do you need to know to feel confident that you could actually do it this time? These are just some of the questions you might want to ask as you seek out resources to help you learn what you need to know. As you continue to think about your own unique birth experiences and what you want this time around, you will instinctively come up with your own questions based on what is most important to you. Once you know what you need, you simply need to ask one more question. Where can you find that information? I'm talking about uterine rupture. I can't possibly get into all the details here, but if you have had a previous cesarean and would like a vaginal birth, then two excellent resources are the International Cesarean Awareness Network, ICAN, and VBAC Facts. There are also additional resources at the back of this book. One thing you absolutely need to know about VBAC is that it's not a procedure. VBAC is the default outcome when you don't schedule a surgery or consent to a repeat cesarean. Sadly, a lot of people seem to have forgotten that labor will start on its own if you're given enough time, and even if your uterus is scarred, it doesn't mean you can't have a physiological birth without intervention. I have served women who have had multiple cesareans and helped them go on to have vaginal births. In fact, one of my first inspirations was my friend Wendy. Wendy had 3 previous cesareans. She was an older mother and deemed too fat by many of the doctors she consulted about having her 4th baby naturally. They all told her that it was too dangerous, citing a risk of uterine rupture as the main concern. She was told the percentage that the risk increased and the fact that she was 3 times more likely to have complications, but what her doctor hadn't counted on was Wendy actually knowing the numbers. This is what I encourage you to do. Know your numbers and start educating yourself on the risks before you talk to a medical professional. This is especially important if you are planning a vaginal birth after multiple cesareans, because the medical system will do anything they can to talk you out of it. You also need to be aware of all your rights. You might have made some choices or agreed to certain exams because you didn't know you could decline them. You might have been told that it was policy, and as a first-time mom, you didn't know that you could question it. It's not your fault, and now you know better, so you won't fall for those lines again. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for saying no. If they do, then they aren't the right people to support you. Finally, you need to start researching your options. There might have been things you overlooked before that you can explore for this pregnancy. Don't rule out home birth just because you think it's not allowed. Don't assume that because you had 1 or more cesareans that you are doomed to have another cesarean. Remember, you get to decide, not them. Unfortunately, knowing your rights and your true risk levels for interventions isn't enough, but it's still a start in the right direction. The more you discover about how birth works and why it didn't work last time, the more you'll be able to plan differently this time around. You'll also be more informed of the risks, and that will allow you to have a clearer picture of what your backup plans might look like. Journal exercise 2.2. Make sure that as you follow the questions for getting the right education, that you also include these as well. And as a reminder, the questions for the right education can be found either in the previous chapter for first-time moms, or you can go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and get the whole list. Choose your safest spaces. I've already touched on choosing your environment for learning and support, so I won't repeat myself here. You will want to be extra careful if you desire a vaginal birth after cesarean, because mom groups can be brutal. For this reason, you might want to skip the mainstream mom groups and find a good VBAC group, preferably one that also includes moms planning a home birth after cesarean, also known as an HBAC. Home births are very low intervention, so you'll get a lot more of an idea of what you could expect in your labor, and you'll be able to see that you don't have to agree to a lot of interventions and monitoring in order to have a VBAC. It's also helpful to join groups where there is a focus on true physiological birth, and even if you're not planning on birthing at home, having information on home birth will still do a lot to dispel your fears and give you a sense of control. Why home birth? Because if your goal is to avoid unnecessary interventions, then you are going to want to labor at home as long as possible. And sometimes that means you won't end up getting to the hospital. This is what happened to my friend Christine. She had planned to birth in the hospital, because our local health authority was very restrictive and didn't allow home birth after cesarean. She knew it would be a fight, and she just didn't feel up to arguing with anyone. In the end, though, she didn't have to. Her baby decided for her. Christine had never experienced a physiological labor, so she was underwhelmed by the intensity of her contractions. She didn't realize until much later, after her waters released, that she had been in active labor the whole time. She'd thought it was almost too easy compared to what she'd endured in her previous induction. As her contractions got closer together, her doula suggested it was time to head to the hospital. Christine didn't make it out her front door. Her waters released and her daughter was coming. They called the midwife, and moments later, she arrived at the house and informed Christine that they could still make it to the hospital. Christine decided that if she had to get on the bed again, that she wasn't going anywhere. And so Christine birthed her daughter in her living room. I'm sharing this story with you because I want you to know one thing. Wherever you plan to give birth, you can change your mind. You might choose to birth at home, but then decide that you would rather go to the hospital. Or you might think that because no midwife will support you at home, that you have to go to the hospital, but wind up having a fast birth at home instead. Knowing where you feel safest is important, as is taking an honest look at the policies of particular hospitals and recognizing their limitations. Some are more likely to intervene and push their fear onto you than others. Sometimes the idea of setting foot back in that same hospital can trigger that fear and anxiety all over again. And many moms I have known have told me that they would sooner birth unassisted than go back there. Take Jenny for an example here. She knew that going back to the hospital that traumatized her would not be something she could do. The easy solution would have been home birth. However, Jenny really did want to have the option of the hospital should she need additional monitoring for her blood pressure. In her case, we needed to come up with some safer places for her to birth. Fortunately, she didn't need to travel more than 20 minutes out of town to a smaller hospital that was more in line with her birth plans and was willing to see her as the decision maker in her care. This is where the right environment is extremely important, especially if you are birthing after one or more cesareans. While the typical advice to avoid an unwanted cesarean is to go in pushing, I can tell you from experience that is not a solid plan. Midwives and doulas have shared stories of their clients who went into the hospital where they had been told they were not allowed to birth vaginally. These women were bullied, threatened, lied to, and even forced to have a cesarean they didn't want or need. If the hospital you are planning to birth in says they don't support VBAC, vaginal breech birth, or vaginal birth with twins, believe them. Sure, you might be able to find a loophole and stand your ground to do it, but do you really want to have to fight during your birth? But what if there are no supportive hospitals in your area? This is when you have to really ask yourself, how badly do you want to avoid that pressure? You may need to travel. You might need to consider paying an underground midwife or birth attendant. You might even need to do it yourself or call in assistance at the last possible second. Seeking out the right birth location could mean you need to travel outside of your city or even further, like Wendy did for her VBAC after 3 cesareans. No one in our health service area was willing to allow her to birth her baby vaginally, so she decided to travel an hour out of town to our neighboring health authority in Vancouver Coastal Health and birth at BC Women's Hospital instead. Other women have booked hotels in other cities, even traveled to different states in the US, just to ensure they could get the respectful care they deserved. None of these scenarios is ideal, but until we can change the way that hospitals operate when it comes to maternity care, drastic measures sometimes need to be taken to prove to yourself and to others that the kind of birth you want is actually possible. People only believe VBAC at home is dangerous because the medical system keeps telling people it's dangerous. But the more stories circulate that mothers have had a vaginal birth at home after one or even multiple cesareans, the more that narrative will be questioned. The more something is questioned, the more people start asking for more options within the system. But that's a whole other subject I could get into. All right, so now we have your journal exercises. As a reminder, you just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras, and you can get the whole list as well as all the bonuses that come with this book. So here's what you need to ask yourself as you plan for your right environment. Number one, when thinking about birthing in a safe place where your wishes are respected, what comes to mind? Number two, where can you find yourself freaking out the most or fearing a repeat of what happened last time? Number three, are there alternative places you could birth outside of what you've already experienced? Number four, if you truly need to birth in the hospital, what conditions would need to be in place for you to feel safe and supported there? Number five, what do you need to know to feel comfortable laboring at home as long as possible? Are you prepared for an accidental home birth should it happen? Once you know your level of comfort when it comes to where you feel safest to birth, you're already well on your way to plan your next step. Step 4, interview your birth team. The first time you hired your care provider, you didn't really know what to expect. You might have even hired based on what other people told you about them. But for whatever reason, it didn't work out. They didn't support you. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of hiring the same person who supported them last time. You can still do this if they weren't the reason your birth plan didn't pan out. But before you make that call, I encourage you to dig a little deeper first. Maybe you felt supported in some things you wanted, but not in others. Maybe the care provider you hired was excellent, but they also had limitations within the group practice they were part of. This is what happened to me with Jules. I loved her and would have happily hired her again, but she warned me not to do so. She told me that the practice she was working for trusted machines more than their hands, and that in any case, she was retiring. I also liked a few other midwives from that same practice, but here's the thing. Liking someone isn't enough. If you really like your midwife or doctor and you enjoy talking to them, then ask them out for coffee. But don't hire them just because they're nice. Instead, you need to refer back to what you want for this birth. You need to be fixated on one thing and one thing only. Can this person truly support you in what you want? If they can't, then it doesn't matter how nice they are. They're not going to be able to deliver on what you truly desire for yourself and your baby. It might be a policy that their practice has, or it might be their own lack of training in a certain skill. It might be fear. But as you conduct your interview process, if they tell you that what you want isn't safe or allowed, what they actually mean is, I'm not confident enough to support you in this or to go against policy for you. Choosing a doula is also similar in this sense. You might have really liked your doula and developed that bond with them. It might feel like a betrayal in your eyes for you to choose someone else. But here's why you need to get past that. Your previous doula might not be able to serve you the way you need now. Jenny loved her doula she had hired in her first pregnancy. In fact, we were all good friends. This doula was much older and embodied the maternal energy that Jenny had felt was needed when she was a first-time mom. But while she was very much loved and appreciated, it didn't make sense for Jenny to hire her again. Instead of wanting a mother figure present at her birth, Jenny wanted someone closer in age who was also scrappy in making sure that her clients were not disturbed in their births. Basically, Jenny needed someone who would stand in front of the door and block the nurses and doctors from invading the birth space until she wanted them there. She already knew everything she needed to about physiological birth and her rights, and she already knew that she would want a doula who could assist her during postpartum as she would have a toddler and a newborn to care for at the time. It simply made sense for Jenny to hire a doula team that offered this additional postpartum service, which not every doula offers. As a seasoned mom, you may also have concerns about how you'll handle your older child or children and a newborn. You might also be planning a home birth after a previously traumatic birth, or you might have had a cesarean and want someone skilled in supporting VBAC. There might also be other services you would like your doula to offer. This isn't to say that your previous doula won't be able to offer these things too, but that's why you're going to want to branch out and interview first before you choose. If your doula makes the cut, great. But if they don't, they'll understand. You deserve to get the support you need, and loyalty can limit your options if you aren't careful. All right, now we move on to journal exercise 2.4. As a reminder, you can get the whole list at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. And when you take action is when the transformation happens. Otherwise, it's just information that you're gathering, and it's not going to help you have your empowered birth. So please take these questions seriously, do the work, and that will actually help you to create the roadmap to your dream birth. Because as I said, I'm committed to you having an empowered birth. I will give you everything that you need in order to move forward with your dream birth, but you have to take the action steps. All right, so here are journal exercises 2.4. So now it's time to refer back to your list of questions. You will also want to think about what happened last time and what phrases were said that helped you feel supported, as well as those that you never want to have uttered in your presence ever again. Ask yourself the following. Number 1, when you think back to your last care provider, what did you most like about them? Number 2, what didn't you like? Number 3, what words did they say that led to you feeling like it wasn't safe or that you didn't have control? Number 4, what could have gone better? Number 5, if you had the opportunity to hire them again or had to hire them again, what would you need them to tell you in order to feel confident in having them support you? Now we're going to go into the doula questions. If you hired a doula last time, ask these questions. Number 1, when you think back to your last doula, what did you most like about them? Number 2, what didn't you like? Number 3, what words did they say that led to you feeling like you weren't safe or that you didn't have control? Number 4, what could have gone better? Number 5, if you had the opportunity to hire them again or had to hire them again, what would you need them to tell you in order to feel confident in having them support you? Now that you know what you did and didn't like when you hired your support team last time, you will know what to watch out for so you don't make the same mistake twice. However, I will mention that there is a lot more to hiring a good care provider that goes beyond the scope of this book. I encourage you to check out the resources at the back of this book, as well as read How to Hire Your Care Provider and Your Empowered Birth Plan Roadmap for more thorough training in planning your ideal birth. Finally, we have arrived at the final section of this chapter, getting your family, friends, and partner to support you after you've already had a previously traumatic birth or one where not everything went to plan. Step 5, train your support team. Here's something that your partner might not want to admit to you. They are terrified right now. They don't want another bad experience, but they also don't have the insight into that experience yet that you do. They might still be operating under the old story that they heard from your doctor or midwife. They might have heard things from family and friends. Whatever the case, if you tell them that you want to skip out on the hospital this time or plan a vaginal birth after a previous cesarean or assisted delivery where the doctor used forceps or cut an episiotomy for a stuck baby, they're going to freak out. After all, they don't know anything about physiological birth. They just know that the last time you went into labor, things went wrong. So what do you do? Well, a lot of people get this part wrong and try to bombard their loved ones with articles backing up the evidence for what they want. You send them articles on the safety of home birth or VBAC. You insist that what you want is safe, but they still aren't comfortable with it and tell you that they just can't support it. What's going on? Why is none of that information sinking in? Well, it's because you aren't talking to the logical part of their brain, but instead trying to talk to them when they are in crisis. Remember, they care about you deeply. They don't want anything bad to happen to you, and the circumstances of your last birth might have triggered them to believe that something far worse could have befallen you. Think about the language used when a cesarean is unplanned. Everything is labeled an emergency cesarean if it's not scheduled ahead of time. This is true regardless of whether it was a real emergency or just impatience of a doctor who wanted to speed up delivery so they could go home for dinner. If you had Pitocin during your labor, that might have set off the emergency, but your partner or loved ones might not have that frame of reference. In their mind, you could have died, or your baby could have died, or you both could have died. In their mind, planning a home birth or going for a VBAC against the standard recommendations means you are tempting fate. So how do you address this issue and get the support you deserve? Well, in some cases, it's better not to tell them anything at all. Some people in your life simply don't need to know and don't get to have an opinion on how you birth. Your nosy mother-in-law, for example, does not need to know. Neither does your neighbor. If you tell your best friend, then make sure they aren't stuck in their own trauma, because they might unconsciously project that onto you. They might even become envious of you for choosing to birth in a way that they weren't comfortable with, and they secretly wish they had your courage. Envy can lead to a lot of uncomfortable emotions. You know your friends better than I do, so ask yourself what their possible reactions might be. The only person you need to tell your plans is your partner, provided you are in a healthy relationship and can trust them. I have seen what happens when the partner is not on board, and often they end up freaking out and pushing the mother into agreeing to go to the hospital when she was determined to stay home, or convince her to get the epidural because he can't stand to see her in pain. In extreme cases, women have tried to keep their partners in the dark about their plans to birth at home, only for them to find out and insist they go to the hospital. This has even led to them becoming stressed out and winding up back on the operating table they were trying to avoid. Another case of failure to progress, thanks to the stress of an unwanted transfer and an agitated spouse. Like it or not, your partner will feel they have a say in your birth, and if you dismiss their concerns, they will take it personally. What you need to do is think about the experience of your last birth from the perspective of your partner. Even better, you can ask them about what it was like for them. The more you get curious and seek to understand their perspective, the safer they will feel. It will help them get out of the crisis so that you can slowly move the conversation away from the actual trauma and toward a greater sense of possibility. I remember the moment Rebecca's partner expressed sadness that he had been robbed of the births of his first two sons. He had felt powerless to help his wife and hadn't known what to do back then. He could see that those births haunted her, but he had no idea what to say or how to help. When he expressed those feelings and they were finally heard and validated, he was able to move past his fear and step into his role as her protector without trying to control the outcome. He caught his own son and finally got to experience the connection that had been missing from the previous births. Your partner can be your greatest protector and ally, or your greatest liability. The exercises in this last section will help you get them on board. But if you want to go deeper, Make sure you also get your bonuses that came with this book at empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras. Journal exercise 2.5. You're going to take out that coil notebook one more time. Ask yourself the following. Number 1, what might your partner or family member be feeling about how your last birth went? Number 2, what fears might they be holding on to? Number 3, why do you need them to know your plans this time? What support are you looking for? Number 4, who should not learn your plans for this birth? Number 5, do you have enough support where you're at currently, or do you need to bring other people into your circle? Number 6, if you do need to bring others in, what is lacking in the support you're already getting from family and friends? What qualities or experiences would these new people need to have to be a valuable member in your support network? And when you've completed this list, take a break. You've definitely earned it. All right. So the last chapter in this book, I'm going to be sharing my final thoughts and what the empowered birth method really does. I'm also going to invite you to go deeper with this, tell you a little bit about some of my programs that I have on offer, what I have available. This will, of course, expand as I get further. Right now, I'm currently recording this in 2024. It is April as of recording this video. So you can always reach out to hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com to find out if there are more resources. You can follow all the social media channels. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. As you know, you've got this channel. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to these videos on this channel. And definitely keep following me on empoweringmomsbirth.com. Because as I said, I am committed to you having an empowered birth. And when you become an empowered mom, you're an empowered mom for life. No one can ever take your power away from you again. If you are finding value with this and you're like, this is amazing and I want to shout it from the rooftops, I'm also going to invite you to think about becoming an empowered mom ambassador, which means that you're going to get discounts and additional merchandise. This is actually a shirt that was designed by Jenny. Yes, the same Jenny that I talked about inside Your Empowered Birth, my best friend and business partner. She's created both the birthhousenetwork.com and Empress Birthworks. So Empress Birthworks makes merchandise that spreads the empowered birth message. And what she does is she also helps train up the birth workers and the empowered mom ambassadors in our program to be able to spread that empowered birth method. So if you do want to know anything about that, all you have to do is write out to hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you were able to get everything that you needed. If you have had a traumatic birth, if you have any questions, as I said, you can reach out to me. Make sure you also go and get the extras, the whole list of questions to ask when you are going through the empowered birth method is available. You just put your name and email in. You go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras, and you're going to get the whole list of questions. You're also going to get questions to ask before you hire a doula, before you hire a care provider. There's a decision-making framework, and there's a birth plan mini course that builds on the empowered birth method. Because the empowered birth method is all about aiming for true natural birth, and then pulling back, creating the safety net with the 5 pillars of empowered birth. And then we go deeper with that with the right mindset and the right support, which I'll talk about in the next video when I share my final thoughts. So thank you so much. Again, if you want to support the empowered birth movement, you can go and get my book, Your Empowered Birth. It is available on Amazon, or you can go deeper with any one of our courses. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Happy birth planning, and I will see you soon. Bye.